Welcome in to another episode of Everything is Logistics. I am your host, Blythe Brumleve, and this is a very special edition of the podcast because we're actually live right now. We are going live on LinkedIn, possibly YouTube in the future. But for folks who may not know, I am part of the LinkedIn Podcast Academy, and part of those requirements is writing a newsletter and also going live once a month. I've been a part of the program since late March when it launched. I did some traveling in April, and here we are in May, and I haven't done a single live broadcast. So, hoping to change that. And with this first topic, is really going to be sort of intertwined with my weekly appearances on FreightWaves Now. I appear on FreightWaves Now every Wednesday at 10 a.m. with a topic that we can kind of have a conversation around. So, the goal and the thought process behind a broadcast like this is that I will be able to have that conversational tone around a topic, particularly marketing, AI, that's really my bread and butter, anything that helps the one person marketing or the one person sales team. And so being able to talk about that in a conversational tone and then also be able to start these broadcasts immediately after that appearance. So then we can kind of dive into a little bit more of the nuance and the research behind why I picked that topic to begin with and why you should care. And so looking forward to doing these probably twice a month to start. And then sort of the lay of the land as far as how these broadcasts are going to work is I really want to make something that is enjoyable on the listener end, even if you don't watch it live. I hardly ever watch LinkedIn lives while they are live on the platform. I like listening to them after the fact when I can listen to them in my own time. I typically listen, when I listen to podcasts, I listen to a bunch of them in a row. And so I really wanted this broadcast to be able to focus and play to both of those markets. So with that said, love to be able to, one of the biggest draws of doing these broadcasts and what I would love to be able to do is to involve more of you in the discussion, in the conversation through Q&A. But particular format that I am aiming for is doing Q&A at the end of the discussion. So anytime we go live on the platform, this one is actually quote unquote pre-recorded. So I'm recording this immediately after FreightWaves Now, and then I'm going to be sending it out as if it's live just to kind of, get my feet wet a little bit with the StreamYard platform and to be able to, get the nuances like the logo in the upper right-hand side of the video. I'm going to be bringing up some different B-roll, some different articles that we're going to be discussing in just a minute. But just so you kind of, get a peek behind the curtain of what I'm working on. I didn't really expect to start doing lives again, especially after the Cyberly show ended back in November of 2022. That's the last time I've really done a lot of live broadcasts where I host it. So this is going to be a good mix of both. But if you're a podcast listener, if you watch on YouTube or you watch after the fact, hopefully this will be just as useful to you as if you were watching live. So with all of that said, I'm always taking questions. I'm always looking for additional feedback. So if you have questions that you're struggling with, especially around the AI movement, then send them to me, send them to in a DM, comment on this post with your question, and I will answer them live in a future broadcast. But for this first one, I just wanted to make sure that I could do a little recording first and then get into the discussion. So now that we've got all of that housekeeping kind of out of the way, the main topic that we discussed on FreightWaves Now today is discussing lead gen and lead gen in a down market. We all want lead gen right now, especially in not just a down market, but a tight market. Competition is really tough right now. It's challenging to sell against other companies and other services. And so how do you differentiate yourself? How do you make sure that even your lead gen campaign is working? That's going to be our main topic for today's show. And the reason I want to start with this is because a lot of us are probably not very, I don't want to say not busy, but we have a lot of work to do, but at the same time, it's slowing down. And so during that slowdown, what do we do? And that is, you need to really, first step is to reevaluate your processes and reevaluate and audit everywhere that you appear online or your company appears online. So your social media pages, all of your business pages, even your own, LinkedIn profile, anywhere else where you are active online, your website, of course, you want to audit all of those things to make sure that when a prospect or a lead comes to your page or comes to your website, that you are ready to accommodate them. And what do I mean by ready to accommodate them? Well, let's take your social media page, for example. Where is that pathway to conversion? If I am a new user, if I am a prospect and I am coming to your social media page, you probably routed me there from somewhere. Was it an ad? Was it a cold email campaign? Was it somebody within your company that was talking about the company and the visitor arrives on the page? What does that next step look like? Do you want them to book a meeting? Do you want them to schedule a demo? Do you want them to just watch a demo that's already pre-recorded on your site? Or do you want them to call a phone number? You want to make sure that that is clearly established on your social media pages and even your own personal pages, and also within your cold outreach campaigns and also your ad campaigns. Where are you sending that traffic, and what does that look like for the visitor to make a conversion? We just redid a website for a recruiting agency, and all of their social media posts were redirecting folks to their website to apply. But when those folks arrived to the website, there was nothing for them to say, okay, this is the next step that I should take. So you need to keep that in mind as you're sending your marketing messages out there, because you want to make sure that that pathway to conversion is crystal clear and it works. You would be surprised at how many times that folks will arrive on a site, they'll click on a phone number and the phone number doesn't work, or it leads to a bad phone number, or it leads to a generic phone number where someone is going to answer, but they're not going to be able to answer and be able to help that person with the questions that they're coming to you with. So what does that process look like? And make sure that it actually functions and that it actually works. It's a great time to audit a lot of these different processes. And then another thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you are testing the forms on your site. There is nothing worse, and I mean nothing, because I personally experienced this in practically through my computer outside of a window, because of the fact that I did all of the hard work, I did all of the marketing, and then the visitor arrived on the site and the damn forms didn't work. So you want to make sure that your damn forms work on your website, so that way there's a clear path to conversion for the visitor, and then also there's a clear follow-up process for whoever is on the receiving end of those forms. I manage more than 30 websites in the freight industry. I manage my own forms, and we do testing every single month just to be able to make sure that we know the forms are working and they're routed to the proper person. So then that way that person can follow up accordingly. So it's a good time. That's my first and initial tip, is to make sure that you audit all of your social media and your Google My Business page. That's another really big one. If you don't have a Google My Business page, you need to make sure you get that, because it's like free advertising on Google. It's free to do. All you do is sign up on Google My Business. You submit your address and where you're located. They'll send you a little postcard with a verification number, just to make sure that you are actually there and that you are actually at that address location. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that you want to make sure that you're taking advantage of all of these platforms that are free to use. They cost you time as far as an investment wise, but they're free to use. And that pathway to conversion is solidified with a strong foundation. And then that way, when the user does eventually see your social media or see your campaign, whether it's ad or email or whatever, the fact that when they come to your site, then there's that pathway to conversion is actually suitable for that person to take it. It's crystal clear, and there's no sort of guessing game around that. So fix that first. That's far and away tip number one. And you should actually be testing this at least once a quarter, just to make sure, because you never know with especially with websites. If you update one part of the site, it could force other things or other script errors, code errors within the rest of the site. It could cause them to malfunction. So as long as you're testing these on a regular basis, then you can stop a problem before it becomes a big problem. So just keep that in mind. Now, the next thing that we discussed on FreightWaves Now is really utilizing a lot of these different tools that have flooded the market in recent months. And of course, I'm going to be talking about ChatGPT. It is the fastest growing app to 100 million users in the history of technology. it's safe to say that I don't want to say it's safe to say, it's absolutely already here and it's dominating a lot of workforces. And if it hasn't affected your work already, within 6 months, it absolutely will. And I want to bring up this next article because this is going to really tie into the final topic that I want to get into, and that's creating your why buys. And I'll get into why buys in just a second. It's essentially a cold email outreach campaign, but it's centered around getting through the noise of AI and getting through the noise of all of these other campaigns that are mass created, that are just blanket sent out, and there's no regard for the end user and what their experience looks like. We don't want that. We don't want a bad experience for the user, whether we're doing cold outreach or a prospect is trying to get in touch with us. We want a very good experience. And then that segues into what tools can we use to get there faster? And that is ChatGPT. So I want to bring up this first article, and bear with me, I am new to using StreamYard as a host. I've been on other live broadcasts, but this is my first one that I am doing myself. So we're going to add to screen. So if you are listening, I'm sorry you can't see this article, but it is a newsletter that I wrote a few weeks back titled AI is Forcing Another Work Revolution Upon Us. Here is what to do about it. And if you want to read that in depth, it's over on my LinkedIn profile. Just search for Blythe Brumleve. You should be able to find it. And it's one of the more recent. There's only 4 issues so far with this LinkedIn partnership. So it should be pretty easy to find. But I gathered a bunch of stats that should be pretty eye-opening, I think, for a lot of folks out there. So let's run through a few of them. Now, in order to kind of understand, what is happening in the AI workforce, is that we have to kind of think about what the modern workday looks like. And the modern workday has really only been around for about 100 years. Henry Ford came up with it in the early 1900s, and he came up with the concept of, the 8 hour rule. So you get 8 hours at work, you get 8 hours at home, and 8 hours for sleep. That has dominated our workday for the last 100 years, and it hasn't really evolved until COVID. When COVID happened, it forced another work revolution where everybody is working from home. It pulled a lot of these, sort of older industries, these legacy industries, logistics being included. It pulled them all into the 21st century where, the majority of people now have webcams. Shocker. They now have, not a lot, more people should have microphones, but things like, at home, studio experiences, at home work environment, a dedicated place for you to work from home instead of spending that time traveling to and from work and spending that 8 hours at the office and then driving back, or 8 hours at, a factory or a warehouse and then driving back to your home. So that has existed for about 100 years. And a lot of that has changed in the last couple of years, and a lot of it is going to keep changing. Change is the only constant that we can sort of expect. So running through, now that you have sort of a backstory about that, there's one really alarming. I guess alarming is probably a Freudian slip, because it's one of those things where there is a new study that just came out by Gartner that says the share of US industry employment exposed to automation by AI. And this was done not by Gartner, but actually by Goldman Sachs. And they estimate 25% of US jobs across all industries could be at risk to replacement by AI, but the number rises dramatically for legal roles and office admin roles. So 25% of US jobs across all industries are at risk for being replaced, but when you're talking about legal, it's 44%, and when you're talking about office and admin roles, it's the legal jobs is 44%, office admin roles is 46%. So when you think about the jobs that are going to be largely impacted, it's the back office. It's a lot of these white collar roles, knowledge based work. I think there was a fear for a very long time, especially by truckers, that robots are going to not by truckers, but by folks within the trucking industry, because truckers are very aware of the skill set that you need in order to operate that big piece of heavy machinery. However, there are lots of folks within the industry that have been trying to automate a lot of those jobs, whether it's warehouse robotics, or some capacity of the trucking industry. A lot of different facets within blue collar work was expected to be replaced by automation, by AI, by technology. When in reality, what we're seeing is that maybe the blue collar jobs are safe or safer from AI that's now going to come in and really, I don't want to say wipe out, but it's really going to change how we work. And so knowing this, it seems a little scary. Definitely feels scary, but it's not scary if you pay attention to where the market is moving. That's what I've always prided myself on. So hopefully, with the things that I listen to and the things that I pay attention to, hopefully I can be a good curator of that content for you, and hopefully help you sort of, I guess, be the flashlight in the dark of night in order to try to find hope and figure out how your job can adjust, because your job will probably be impacted by AI at some point, where, at least 30% of your role. I've heard some, investors, VC type folks say that anywhere from 30 to 50% of your role will probably be powered by AI. So, what do we do about it? I mean, there are so many stories that we can talk about for that I mentioned in this newsletter, such as the open letter calling for a 6-month halt on future AI development. This was written by Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak, Elon Musk, and other prominent computer scientists. There's a really heartfelt Reddit post that made the rounds, talking about a 3D game designer where he really loved creating different characters for a game, and Midjourney, which is another AI platform that creates images based on text prompts. So if you are, he was using this, or his boss wanted him to use this platform, and now essentially his job has gone from creating beautiful characters into creating text prompts that then create the beautiful characters. So he feels like his purpose, his job is gone. Now, on the flip side, there's another designer that works within that same company, and he's been loving it. His productivity has increased. It's allowed him the ability to even the playing field a little bit with the skill set that he was lacking from a 3D game perspective. The boss obviously loves it because the productivity has increased dramatically. So, knowing that those stories exist, I'm empathetic and I'm sympathetic to those different stories where, a guy legitimately feels like he has lost his purpose in his art that he's been creating. But I could make the argument that he hasn't lost that purpose. He is still free to create any of that art in his own way. But if he's working for an employer is going to be looking at ways to increase productivity. And that's exactly what these tools do, is to increase productivity and give you access to skill sets that you might not have had the time or desire to learn. I know the power of me personally. I know the power of what a great image will do for a video, for an article, but I don't know how to create that image from scratch. I don't know how to go into a program like Illustrator and create that from scratch. I could hire somebody to do that, but that takes time, energy, and money. On the flip side, though, if I just learn how to use, and what I have been doing is learning how to use Midjourney, which is one of those image creator platforms that is, you enter in a text prompt and it can create images for you. If you subscribe to my newsletter on LinkedIn, then any image that I use for those newsletters, I am practicing using Midjourney to create those images instead of, going to another source where I could possibly be sued for copyright violation, or going to another source where, I mistakenly have done this in the past, especially in my early blogging days in the 2000s, where I've taken an image from social media thinking that it's free to use because it's posted to social media, when in fact that is not free to use. And of you learn the hard way of how you're going to gather images or how you should source images, but then you also learn the hard way of, well, I still need to get images. So where am I going to get them from? And this type of program, like a Midjourney, evens the playing field for someone like me. Now, you could do it on the flip side where someone is used to creating beautiful images and maybe they're not as great of a writer. So these other tools like ChatGPT or Copy.ai or Jasper, some of these other copywriting tools can help you become a better writer, even if you don't have that skill set. So I'm a big fan of these tools. I think we should embrace them. I think we should use them to our advantage. There is a little bit of a scary side. There is a little bit of an empathetic, sympathy side of things. But let's talk about how to implement these tools into your workday. And there was a great post that I want to bring up and that I'm going to kind of read from And that comes from the Marketing AI Institute podcast. It is a great podcast. They're over on YouTube as well. So they record, it's two guys, Mike Kaput, and I'm blanking on the other host name, but they do a weekly show. It releases every Tuesday morning, I believe. They record it on Monday. So they recap all of the biggest AI news that has happened and how they're consulting other companies to start using these tools. And so when you think about it that way, education is going to be the biggest barrier. So you want to make sure that you're starting to incorporate regular education because this stuff is moving so fast. You have to really focus on how am I going to get educated quickly? And then how am I going to stay educated for all of these new tools that are coming out into the market? So the Marketing AI podcast, I would highly suggest subscribing to them. They're on LinkedIn as well. You can follow a couple of the creators of that, and they'll be able to, at least offer you insight and tips as to what's going on in the market and how you can kind of adjust. But going through some of the use cases of how you can start using AI in your business, my first tip and what I personally do is set ChatGPT. First of all, ChatGPT is free for anyone to use. They have three different versions. That's 3.0, 3.5, and 4.0. You can only access 4.0 if you're a paying member. If you're a paying member, it's only $20 a month. So it's the best $20 a month that I spend each month because it's a no-brainer for me. It also gives you access to new features and new tools that are coming into the market. So if you want to try out the just regular plain 3.5 version, you can sign up for a free account, give it a try, start practicing your text prompts as you input it into the system, and then you can set it as your start screen on your browser. So either bookmark it, set it as your start screen, and then really keep that window open on your computer. So then that way you are training yourself on how to use this to summarize long form content. Say you found an article and you really want to summarize it for your customers, for your audience, you could input that text into ChatGPT and say, summarize this in less than 200 words. Theoretically, you can do this with books, with podcasts. It's not quite there yet tech wise on ChatGPT, for example, but there are other solutions that will summarize that for you. That's probably a topic for a later show that's a little bit more advanced. I want to keep this more for the folks who haven't really dived into a lot of the just stuff that's going on in AI. It's been so much of a quick, fast revolution that is happening right before our eyes that it feels overwhelming and intimidating at times because I feel like I have rewritten my work processes for not just customer outreach, but also sales, marketing, website design, outreach to customers. Like it can feel really overwhelming at times, but education start with that first Marketing AI podcast. Then next, I think that it was a really smart post by the host of the Marketing AI podcast. And he said that on this post, I would try to bring it up on the screen, but I don't know how to really do that yet. So I'm going to keep it on this article for now and just keep that display on the screen. And so let's just move forward with these suggestions from Mike Kaput. And he said, need help finding use cases for AI in your business and some helpful advice to do that. Step number one, write down a list of all the things you do in a week. This is great for my fellow, process nerds out there. This is probably like step number one ingrained in your brain. But if you're not used to setting up a process or establishing a process, you are literally just taking a Google Doc, taking a sheet of paper, and you're writing down everything you do for a week. You don't have to do this right from memory. What really helped me is to have a couple Post-it notes off to the side or a Google Doc. And then you just for 1 week, you just practice it in your head that anything new you do, responding to emails, how long did it take you to do that? And sort of time tracking of what you do, how long it takes you to do that. And so that's step number one, is to write down everything that you do in your business. Step number two, which kind of hints to what I just said, is list out how much time you estimate each task takes. Number three, for each task, ask yourself three questions. Is it data driven? Is it repetitive? Does it involve trying to make a prediction? If you answer yes to any of these, highlight the task. Then step number four, Sort the list of highlighted tasks by which ones take the most time. You now have a starting list of high value potential use cases for AI, and you can use it as a jumping off point to research vendors and tools. And so, this is a really good way of just taking the approach of, okay, I know what I do in a week. Now, how do I use these tools that are flooding the market, like a Chat GPT or like a Jasper, Copy.ai, some of these other tools. Swell.ai is another one that I use for podcasting, but that's not applicable to everyone. But 9 times out of 10, you're using writing in some part of your job. So a couple tools that I recommend is definitely Copy.ai, because they really help to bridge the gap between, okay, I have this tool, but how do I use it? And so what they do is they send out daily prompt, and you don't even really have to be a customer of Copy.ai yet. Just sign up for their emails and you can get what's called the daily prompt email, and it will send you examples of what to use in a prompt that can help you in research for new customers. It can help you with summarizing emails. It can help you with, creating. There's even, new AI tools that are going on top of tools that we already use. HubSpot is a great example of this. I'm willing to bet the overwhelming majority of folks within the freight industry are using a CRM. And then if you're using a CRM, you're probably using HubSpot. Well, they just released a new tool called ChatSpot that is not almost, it is a AI tool powered on top of your CRM that you're already using. So it can help you identify revenue targets, who just raised money, paste this LinkedIn profile and tell me a summary of what this person's role is. So then I can then brainstorm what their problems in their job are at, and how my solution, my product, my service can help them adjust and can help them, maybe save a little money, save a little time, save a little frustration. So it helps you dramatically in the research part of the process. So using these tools, figuring out how they can fit into your workday and how you can utilize them is a great way to get started. And you don't have to be an expert right away, but it will help you to craft that messaging, to craft, those end goal or those end goals that you want the prospect or the lead to take advantage of. And so when you think about it from that it's going to help you do things faster. It's going to help you write an email faster. It's going to help you create a campaign faster. It's going to help you, do all of these other things faster. But also recognize that it's going to help a lot of other people do things faster. And it's going to create a lot of noise. It's going to create a lot of spam. And until some of these spam filters can keep up, it's going to be challenging on the end user's hand to filter through the noise. And so if you can use these tools not to write your entire email campaign for you, but to massage your own words. So that the best, I guess, phrase that I can use for, a lot of different discussion points around AI is that it will get you to 80%, but it's going to take you massaging that last 20% to get it to a place where that's a suitable email that sounds like you. It doesn't sound like a robot, and it's valuable to the end user. So when I talk about all of these things, first of all, let me change the screen so I can get back to just a full person view. Here we go. Okay, so we're doing these things live on the fly. So now we are at a normal view. I got a little pep in my step. I got a good flow going here. So let's lock it in with this final topic, because of the fact that we're now going to have so much different content that's coming into I've even seen like LinkedIn, they're starting to use AI to come up with, different topics and suggestions and comment suggestions and DM replies of what you should say, things like that. Like this is all AI, and it's all slowly being integrated into every facet of our internet experience. So knowing all of that, it's going to be challenging to have a prospect see your message, resonate with it enough so then that way they make a decision that they want to book a meeting with you, that they want to request more information from you. So how do you stand out from the rest? And the way you do that is by this new concept called creating why buys. Now, I first heard this on a podcast called Stacking Growth, and the guest was a woman by the name of Jessica Watts. She calls herself a sustainable revenue evangelist on LinkedIn, which I love that title. So she created this concept, and I'm not sure if she created it or maybe the company that she worked for created it, but she broke this down into some really, really valuable insights into what is a why buy. A why buy is why you should buy from me. And you should be thinking about it in the lens of the customer that you're trying to reach. So, going back to that initial topic of how we kicked off the show of lead gen in a down market, yes, the job market is tough. Yes, the sales market is tough right now. And yes, we have an influx of all of these tools that are coming in that are going to continue to shift our work life in ways that we probably don't even know yet, and it's going to completely catch people off guard in the next 6 to 10 months who haven't been paying attention. So if you have been paying attention, then these are ways that you can start to incorporate. So not only from an educational level, but also from a daily habit of setting ChatGPT to a start screen, setting it as a bookmark so that it's right there in front of your face every single day so you can practice new ways to use it. You want to think of yourself as if we are facing this sort of, I don't want to say like existential crisis, but it kind of feels that way at times, that our job will be replaced, that at least the majority of our job will be replaced, or automated or powered by AI, then it makes sense to be at the forefront of using this technology. So if you are working at a company and you volunteer to be the AI person, volunteer to be the person that's going to practice and to check out the processes of the business and the company that you're operating in and how you can use these tools to get better. Be the voice and start using these tools, because whether you could be the leader in charge of incorporating a lot of these different tools within the company, or if something, the worst case scenario happens where you're replaced because AI can help, one person do the job of many. If you're replaced, you still know these tools that you can take into a new gig, into a new business, into a new company, or maybe even start your own business because you now have the power of using, 5 quote unquote people, digital assistants, virtual assistants, things like that, with using the power of these tools. So we've got all of that out of the way. Let's get back to the why buys. And the why buys, I wish I could set this up. Oh, I think I can. Let me go ahead. I'm going to share my screen, and it's going to be this sales flow documents that I have up on the screen. Yeah, I did it live. Okay, good. So this is sort of my, I guess, proprietary notes or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, and with my fancy layout. So if you're watching, thank you. But if you're just listening to the show, this is basically a document that I have that I almost treat it as my Bible. I take a lot of notes. I listen to a lot of different podcasts. I digest a lot of content in order to be able to create content. 80% of your content journey should be consumption. So then that way, the 20% of you actually speaking and on air and on a podcast will be of value to users. So this is my sort of guidebook. And when I listened to this podcast of Stacking Growth, and Jessica was breaking down, it was such a light bulb moment. And I think it's such a major key for a lot of businesses out there that are going to be faced with these different challenges. And it's with this down market, in a tight market, you can now take these steps to begin to hone in on your messaging and make it short, concise, and specific and to the point. And I feel like that's probably, a bunch of different analogies to say the same thing. But let's get into why buys, how to create them. Now, the first thing you want to do is you want to establish who you're talking to and why. So ask yourself, get out a Google Doc or Microsoft Word doc, or a pen and paper, whatever your pleasure is, but get out that pen and start writing down these applicable to your company, your business. So you want to ask yourself, what is the current state? What is the problem of the current state? What is the future state? And what is the outcome of the future state? You want to keep these, as a reminder, keep these simple and specific. And then you want to create 2 of these. So establish who you're talking to and why. You want to establish 2 of these and turn it into a question. This intro question is the first sentence you're going to use in your cold outreach campaign, which is AKA a why buy. And Jessica goes on to explain that cold email gets a lot of grief. I've been guilty of, trash talking cold email. I think cold calling is largely dead. I think cold email is very, very challenging just because of the enormous amount of folks who just spray and pray, where they grab an email list off of Zoom Info or wherever else, and they load it into their CRM and they just send, 10,000 messages to folks who might not ever need your services ever. So if you want to drown out the noise, because you are going to contribute to the noise if you don't establish these why buys. I just heard from a shipper the other day that said his cold email inbox, or the number of cold pitches that he is getting, has dramatically increased. It's tripled. He said he used to get about 100 a day, anywhere from 80 to 100. Now he's getting more than 300 a day. You don't want to be part of that noise. You want to stand out. And I firmly believe that doing this, creating your why buys, is a way to stand out. So she says list design is messaging. So if you establish who you're talking to and why, then that doesn't necessarily feel too cold emaily, for lack of a better phrase. So she goes into, so now that you've established who you're talking to and why, she goes into, well, what's the pseudo controversial opinion that we're taking? And then you want to create two value props and avoid saying everything that your product or your service does. So you want to keep these short, concise, specific, to the point. And then you get into actually building your email list. So you build it your email campaigns. So you've got who you're talking to and why, you've got your value prop, you've got your super short, specific, targeted email. Now you're going to construct your sequences, whether it's HubSpot, whether it's MailChimp, whether, whatever CRM that you're using. She says the first line in your email should be that question that you figured out in the earlier steps. And then you want to label each sequence. Why buy number one, cold. Why buy two, cold. Why buy one, warm nurture. Why buy two, warm nurture. So you want to have, remember those two different value props we talked about earlier and those two different questions? You want to have those set up in different sequences in your cold email campaigns. And this is how, she also says that this is how we start to track messaging efficacy. So efficacy means, is the message actually working? And I've never actually done this before. So this was really eye-opening for me. I've created cold email campaigns before, but they were sort of one and done. And if the person, booked a meeting for me, great. If not, the email kind of goes into the abyss. I've fallen for these tricks before that companies have taught us years ago, that, oh, it ends up being easier for you to send out 10,000 emails, and maybe it's applicable to 500 people on that list. It's easier for you to do that, but it's seen as an annoyance on the person at the other end of the email. So keeping that in mind, then then you can start really, like, the data collection. You can start analyzing which part of your messaging is working, because then she goes into saying, well, what sequences led to more calls booked? Also ask yourself, what about, say, why buy one is working better than why buy two? Ask yourself, what about why buy one is working better than two? Let's workshop two so we can make it stronger. So you have two of these campaigns going at once, but you're targeted to a list of folks that you've already identified are a good candidate for your product or your service. So she says, imagine a sales rep seeing a why buy sequence and then being able to go to marketing and tell them why buy one is killing it. Go make 2 ebooks on this topic. Another great way for marketing and sales to work together, because the messaging has goals behind it. Marketing is probably going to eat it up because they're able to actually prove value in the work that they're providing, instead of just, making another, PowerPoint presentation tweak for the millionth time. And you're probably doing that 2 days before a conference. This way, it creates a much more collaborative experience between marketing and sales. So then that way you are creating messages that your customer or your prospect actually wants to see. So also thinking about it from the lens of training your business development reps on the why buy messaging. If you're making cold calls, I would imagine that a lot of these, that intro question, that intro sentence is really going to go a lot further than, hey, how you doing? Folks are busy. Folks don't have time to answer, sort of those placating questions and those beating around the bush questions. Get to the point, have it be specific, and then you'll probably be well rewarded because of that. So after you do all of these things and you start monitoring a little bit of why buy one, why buy versus two. So how are they working? How are they performing? And then that helps you develop your baseline data. And this is what gets me really excited, especially as like a marketer and especially from like an executive point of view. Like if you're an executive team and you're looking to see if your messaging is resonating, you probably have no idea of what a baseline even looks like. But if you start from this journey, this really helps to set that strong foundation of what that baseline data looks like, because once we determine messaging that works in the why buys, we can create dashboards that monitor baselines. Once you have baselines, then you can forecast, which is a marketer's, especially a marketer who should be, I don't want to say concerned, but should prioritize revenue and where revenue actually comes from. That would help a marketer tremendously to kind of have that math behind your marketing and be able to sit in on those executive meetings, or to be able to be a founder and be able to answer some of those tough VC questions of whoever's giving you money and how you're spending it. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And now, once you have what those forecasts could be, then you can start monitoring things like dial to pickup, phone to meeting, meeting to contact. And as long as your baselines hold, then you can realistically plan revenue forecasts. And you only have to revisit this why buy campaign when the product or the service changes. That might happen multiple times throughout the year for you, but at least you have that reasoning behind of who you're sending to, why you're sending it to them, and you're cutting through the noise. And you can absolutely use some of these AI tools to help you during this research phase, to help you condense an email from, long paragraphs, which I'm guilty of, into short, specific, concise emails. So then that way your audience is resonating with the messaging that you're trying to send them. So hopefully, that why buy exercise will really be helpful. If it's helpful for you, I can probably share this in a future newsletter. So then that way it's completely broken down in a text format. I've been raving about this because it has really helped me developing my why buys. It's really helped me in the content marketing side of things, so that I know what content to create that my audience is actually going to care about. I love different topics such as, the logistics of Mother's Day flowers, or the logistics of racehorses, or, things like that. But that's not necessarily going to get me web hosting clients. So you need to sort of rein in your brain sometimes and have it become hyper focused on what the end goal is. And the end goal is obviously survivorship of both your role and the business and the company that you're working for. So how can you use a lot of these different tools that are out on the market in order to help along with that process to make yourself more valuable, whether at your current company or a prospective company down the road, and then also helping your customers and prospective customers. So hopefully that was a really good, roundup. I know it really helped me a ton. But for the sake of sounding like I'm just repeating myself over and over again, we've gone about 43 minutes during my first live broadcast. So this was a really fun exercise to sort of run through and to see where the opportunities are at, and some of the behind the scenes of what I'm working on and why I'm working on it, and how I'm using some of these different AI tools to help me in my own work processes. And hopefully, some of these different tips and tricks and strategies will help you in your processes and help you and your company and grow and sort of survive this changing market that we're going to be dealing with, because it's not just right now, but it's in the next, sort of 6 to 10 months, 2 years tops, that, the people who are not paying attention to AI and adopting these tools and starting to use them, you are going to be left behind, and you are in danger of having your job be replaced. So why not fight fire with fire and use these tools to your own advantage, whether it's to further the goals of the company that you work for, but also it's furthering yourself in order to be able to adapt to these tools quickly and be able to adjust your processes more on the fly so you can get more work done in a shorter amount of time. So then you can spend that time doing things that you actually love and, giving yourself a little bit of a chance to have a breather. All of this news can feel very overwhelming. I'm guilty of not filming. I'm guilty of feeling, very overwhelmed at times when it comes to these different topics. But the best case to do is just to be educated and stay educated and start practicing and start using these tools in as many ways as possible. And what really helps is setting ChatGPT. You can go to openai.com, or it's chat.openai.com, to create an account and just start messing around with these platforms. Once you get a little familiar with it, maybe you can add another tool into that mix. But by staying updated on what's going on in the market, it's really going to be an investment, not just in yourself, but your future employment opportunities. So with all that said, hope you guys enjoyed this special first live/recorded broadcast of Everything is Logistics. Going to be doing these again in a true live format now that I have kind of, a good presentation down of what to expect during the live broadcast. So again, how these will work is I will plan to go live immediately after appearing on FreightWaves Now, which I appear usually about 10:05 to 10:20 Eastern Standard Time every Wednesday. So the plan is to go live on LinkedIn and YouTube in the future right after that. And we'll do a similar deep dive into the discussion. And then the goal is at the end of a broadcast like this, I'll be able to answer some of your questions, maybe in the comments or in the chat. And we can keep it, a little bit more collaborative, especially towards the end of the show, because the best part of any kind of discussion like this is finding out like what questions you have, what concerns you have, and how I can help answer those in the future with future content, and helping you stay above, the fray, or above the, not above the fray. I don't even know why I said that. I don't even really know what fray means, but helping you stay above and sort of tread, instead of treading water, you feel like you're swimming in a direction that is known to you. So if you want to find more of my work, you can follow the podcast Everything is Logistics. I actually have it linked, everythingislogistics.com. All of my social media channels are there. Be sure to also subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter. I am putting a greater priority on that newsletter than I am, a traditional newsletter, because in my mindset, when you're on LinkedIn, you're trying to be distracted from something, you're trying to learn about something, you're trying to be educated, entertained. But when you're in your email inbox, it's a to-do list. It's how can I get these tasks done as quickly as possible? So my mindset around that is that I want to create content and put that newsletter content where folks want to be educated and they're looking to be distracted. So that's where I'm hoping to provide value in your feed. So be sure that you are not only connecting with me on LinkedIn, but you're also subscribing to that newsletter, which is where that first story sort of came from with the AI work evolution revolution is upon us. Here's what to do about it. So with all that said, that about does it for this show. And if you want more insight from me, be sure to follow along over at everythingislogistics.com. Thank you again.